Hello, I'm Alexandra August.
And I'm Brian Kronner.
And welcome to the DiscoTrek, a Star Trek Discovery podcast. We are a weekly Star Trek Discovery recap analysis podcast. We drop episodes every Friday, and this week we are talking about episode 6 of season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, The Sounds of Thunder.
It's very thundery.
Brian Kronner joins me this week because Johnny Kolazinski, my illustrious co-host and co-pilot, is actually kind of in transit to Las Vegas right now and is dealing with some flight stuff. So Brian has graciously agreed to step in and be my sub co-pilot and resident The Original Series expert.
Happy to be here.
And where can people? What do you tell me about yourself, Brian?
Well, I own and sometimes operate a website called grizzlybomb.com. Yes. And more recently, I have joined Alex writing over at Comic Book Resources, and we used to work together at geekexchange.com and with Geek Magazine, and I'm all over the interwebs.
He is. And speaking of what else was all over the interwebs tonight, reactions to this episode, what were yours?
This was a fun one. I liked it. It was I liked this better than the last couple episodes for sure.
Yeah, I'm still ruminating on it. In case if you're new to this podcast, we record within the hour after the episode airs or after us seeing it. So everything you're hearing right now is a pretty immediate reaction. But I'm with you. I thought this was kind of almost just a crystalline episode, and how well balanced it was in some of the themes and stories that it kind of brought to a close / brought to a new point. I liked seeing about Kaminar, which we got kind of a taste of in the short trek, through short trek this season. And it's worth noting that this episode was directed by Douglas Arniakowski, and I'm sorry if I butchered that. He directed Lethe, and he also directed The Brightest Star, which was Saru's short trek. And the writer of this episode was Bo-Yeon Kim. Again, might have butchered that name. I apologize. Please feel free to write us and or call us with correct pronunciations. I very much want to correctly pronounce people's names that I only read. But Bo-Yeon Kim wrote The Brightest Star, which was Saru's short trek. So this was almost a sequel or just a continuation of his short trek. How did you feel about it as it relates to?
Well, actually, when I was on a few weeks ago with Johnny, we went over all the short treks, so we talked about them. And at the time, I had talked about how Saru's was my least favorite of them. But now that it's, works more as a tie-in to this episode, I like it better. And it did a good job of setting the stage for this episode. And like you said, this episode had a good balance, sort of like the Kelpians and the Baul, with their balance. But I think this episode had potential to be very cheesy, and they were able to steer away from it. I know I listened last week when you and Johnny talked about it, and Johnny said he thought the Baul there was a chance that they were just going to be another type of Kelpians, and so when I was watching it, that's kind of what I thought was going to happen.
I thought that too.
It wasn't.
I honestly, at the beginning of this episode, if you look at go on.
I was that would have been a very I love the original series. That would have been a very original series thing to do. Like, oh, surprise, they are Kelpians and they're just oppressing the other people.
Well, not only an original series thing to do. I actually wrote because Johnny had mentioned this last week with us too. He asked if I thought the Baul were the Kelpians, and I said, well, honestly, I hope not, because we've just seen that before. Like that's a plot device that Star Trek has done several times in varying degrees. Like there's that one episode of Next Generation where the Cardassians, the Romulans, the Klingons, and the humans all followed. Like it's a Picard archaeological episode, and like he leads the Federation and these other species to find, and he realizes like along the way that the other species are following the same thing too. And they all realize that their ancestor species was one. was one species. So they all come from one being. And so that was that. And then in the movie Insurrection, the people, the Baku, not the Ba'ul, the Baku on the planet Insurrection
so different.
Are being persecuted by this other people who are descendants of them. So it's definitely a theme that Star Trek has addressed before. And I literally halfway through this episode, that's what I thought they were doing. And I didn't mind it because it was well executed, but I was also like, okay. So I was very happy that
it was like a pleasant surprise when that turned out not to be the case. It was kind of like, I wouldn't have been mad if that's what it was, because from a storytelling, but there's a reason they've done it multiple times. It's like, and they shouldn't be slaves to we can't do anything we did before. I mean, there's certain good story elements get used a lot because they're good story elements. But it was a nice surprise that that's not what happened here. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say the Ba'ul became way less frightening. I kind of wanted, at the end of the day, like, I feel like the better ending to this story would have been the Ba'ul all of a sudden becoming the Kelpians.
Yeah.
Or being the Kelpians.
I mean, when the reveal comes and you see what they look like, they look frightening. But from the fact that simply you learn the history that they were the prey and they're afraid of the Kelpians, that immediately downgrades them. Partially because we haven't really seen much of like new Saru. And we know old Saru was afraid of everything. Right. So for a whole race to be afraid of Kelpians when we've only seen Kelpians, as a more meek species, it immediately downgrades how scary the Ba'ul are. I will say this though, Mark Pellington, I had to look it up, did the voice of the Ba'ul.
Okay, right.
While I was watching it, I could have swore it was James Spader, and I thought, thought it was
God, that's like so good.
When that water started to move, I was expecting Ultron or something to rise out of there. Like it sounded and it took me a while. I'm like, who does that sound like? And like he has a lot of very similar vocal inflections that James Spader has. So when I looked, after the episode, I looked it up and I was kind of bummed that it wasn't Spader, but it was, I thought we were going to see Ultron rising up out of the asshole rich kid from Pretty in Pink just rises out of that water with his sweater vest.
Oh my God. He's like, kind of smoking a cigarette and just looks at Sarana or Saru and goes, bitch.
Yeah, he's got like a pink button up with like a white tennis sweater over his shoulders, like
shakes off the goo.
Vintage Spader.
So if you're joining us now, the basic plot of this episode was a continuation of the short trek that introduced us to Kaminar and Saru's people. So Saru the crew of Discovery this week detects another emanation spatial anomaly caused by the quote Red Angel, which has been the continuous mystery throughout the series, these red anomalies that seem to crop up. And after 5 or 6 episodes, we've now realized that every time one of these anomalies crops up, it illuminates some kind of person in need or dire situation. Ash Tyler observes this, and this week an anomaly erupts above Kaminar. By the time they get there, of course, the anomaly appears, but Saru, who has recently realized that his people are not a prey species, they have been made a prey species by a superior species on their planet, the predator species, and the predator species has led them to believe that as the Kelpians mature, they reach a point of immediate death, which is the time of harvesting for the Ba'ul. And Saru realized 2 episodes ago that this is not a natural thing for the Kelpians to do. This is an institutionalized slaughter that the Ba'ul have basically created and turned into some kind of strange religion. So he arrives back at Kaminar and is very gung-ho to save his family and to throw off the Ba'ul rule. Meanwhile, Captain Pike is like, hi, we're Starfleet, and I can't just, like, throw over a sovereign planet's government. And the Ba'ul...
Hey, how you doing? We're Starfleet.
Yeah, and you need to stop what you're doing in your home planet. Bye. Yeah. But the Ba'ul were very clear about not wanting to join the Federation. The Federation dealt with them, and they were like, they're isolationists. They don't want it. And we can't violate the Prime Directive in order to help out the Kelpians, which is exactly what they end up doing this episode.
And it is, I feel like the Ba'ul have like and it may be lessened by the end of the episode, but I feel like it was a really interesting, or had potential to be really interesting. And even though at one point they do attempt to commit genocide, from a human standpoint, I feel like we would have done it way sooner than them. The way that it progresses, the Ba'ul become more advanced technologically. You would think if something similar was happening here, they would create genocide. They'd wipe everybody out. The Ba'ul at least let the Kelpians live like a decent amount of life, and then like, we're not going to do anything until you become a danger to us.
Which you have historically. I think something I didn't mention that Brian is referencing here is that the Ba'ul were hunted by the Kelpians for a long time, which is what we discover in this episode. What Burnham discovers, because they analyze the data from the Red Sphere they analyzed last week. That data says that the Ba'ul were the subservient species until several generations before Discovery's time, when that shifted to the Kelpians. And the Ba'ul essentially rose up and turned and basically managed the Kelpians so they would stop killing them. And you're right, like, it gives them more dimension when you learn that they were truly trying to protect themselves, and did so in such a way that allowed the Kelpians to live some kind of life. And then they, for lack of a better word, exterminated them once they got to a point where they could become aggressive and threaten the Ba'ul again. It's ugly, but it's what civilizations do to protect themselves. It's not pretty, but it's what happened. And
it's like Old Yeller, we're going to let you go until and the minute you become rabid, though, we're going to have to put you down. And maybe I've missed it, but I know they say in this episode we learned Saru, left his planet 18 years ago. He's been in Starfleet for 18 years.
Right.
We don't know.
We kind of estimate that because that's when Georgiou finds him, she's lieutenant, not a captain.
Right.
Right.
But unless I missed it, we don't know how old Saru is. So it's not even like, for all we know, the Kelpians are getting 20, 30, 40 years before.
200s of years. Vulcans live to, 200, 250 years.
Exactly.
Klingons live longer than humans, not as long as Vulcans, but, I feel like the characters that appear on the original series and then reappear on TNG and DS9 indicate that Klingons have a longer lifespan. So I don't always give Discovery credit for knowing that much about Star Trek canon, just because they've so willfully ignored a lot of it. But I think it's certainly possible that the Kelpians have a very long lifespan. And I would almost prefer it if that were the case, because the past couple of weeks, since I saw that short trek, I have been saying, how in God's name did Saru leave a planet that was pre-warp, learn enough to get into Starfleet Academy, which Star Trek canon has established is really, really, really hard. Harry Kim from Star Trek Voyager didn't get into Starfleet Academy on his first try, and he is like a rock star ensign. So not only how Saru obviously had a greater curiosity and knowledge of science than anybody else on his planet, which is how he contacted Georgiou in the first place, or sent the signal that did so. But still, there's so much he has to learn just to get into the academy. And then once he's in the academy, rise up to the rank that he gets to. And then by the time he's on Discovery 2 weeks ago, speaks like 90 languages.
I was just going to say that about the languages, because it's like, and we don't know, because we don't know enough about the Kelpians. We don't know if Kelpians are naturally adept to learning those things, or if that is just something that makes Saru even more extraordinary. Yeah,
that's what Johnny said. He was like, maybe he's a polyglot. And I think that's great. That's awesome. But I want to see it. Like, tell me, because I feel like I was thinking about this week, and the Next Generation always made a point to talk about how good Data was at things, better than humans.
Yeah.
And also the deficits that evolved because of that. And we also got to see Data's abilities, like in the Naked Now, when he's putting the chips back faster, because he has like greater, and they explain that like he has greater reflexes. He can think of things faster. Whereas Discovery is, at this point is having us take it for granted that Saru is so smart, and who Ariam is a good example of this. We got more from her this week. Discovery's resident, like, android, not android, maybe cyborg.
But going back to the very first episode of season 1, we saw her, and the name escapes me, the character's name, the redheaded, the pilot of the ship.
Kayla.
And she's got the thing on her face and stuff. Mm-hmm. Going back to the first episode, they're shown on the bridge, and now here we are halfway through season 2, and these are characters that we've learned nothing about them through a season and a half of the show. And I'm interested in the android character. I want to know more about it. And today, you're like, yeah, we got to see more of her. She got what, 30 seconds of screen
and a direct
time
reference
as Tilly's sidekick. So it's just I'd like to see more. But like you were saying, Data, they made a point to show Data could do things. Discovery takes place way before Next Generation, and not only is our Kelpian's rare in Starfleet, he's the only Kelpian, and they do, like you said, they just seem to take for granted whatever he does. They're just Saru, Saru. It's he would still, even after this many years in Starfleet, he would still be oddity isn't the right word, but a
curiosity,
a curiosity or wonder, it's still, I think people would still be impressed by some of the things he does, and they do seem to take for granted, considering this is prior to Spock becoming, Spock, and prior to Data and everything else we've seen.
That's a good point. Saru is kind of the original, slightly less emotional, very scientific, very cerebral answer to sort of the emotional core of Starfleet, which is very much represented in Michael Burnham, and almost even more so in Captain Pike.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting. Oh, I like that. I like Saru as a precursor to Spock and Data and 7 of 9 even.
You look at each series has had a character similar, not always the same, but similar to that. Deep Space Nine now. God, what's the security officer's name? I'm totally blanking.
On DS9?
The shapeshifter.
Oh, yeah. Odo. Oh, you're right. It's Odo.
Yeah,
the guy who doesn't understand humanity, that's trying to figure it out. There's always that person. It's really innocent. Spock is very superior. Odo is very I'm an old man and I just want to be a security officer. I don't want to deal with you people.
And I'm embarrassed I forgot his name, because Odo was my favorite character on Deep Space Nine, just because he was so angry at everybody all the time. He reminded me of Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino.
Oh my God, you're right. You're
it's just Saru seems like he should be more. Even in tonight's episode, when the doctor was doing the scans of him and talking about how his body chemistry is changing, even then she makes note of we have no other Kelpian specimens to compare you to, you're our only. So I'm just guessing at this stuff. It's he is, even in this advanced society where we have space travel and the Federation is established, and even here the Kelpians are a total mystery, And when you look at the original series, I know Next Generation, Deep Space Nine to a degree also, there were a lot of episodes where they went to unexplored territory, or they made first contact with the world. There was also even early on in the timeline, there was also a lot of Federation establishment. They were constantly we got to stop at this space station and drop off this prisoner, or we got to do this, or we got to Yeah, and here's their bold new mission to explore new worlds and all this, and yet
it's going along the eastern seaboard. They're on an Amtrak. They're on an Amtrak.
Exactly, they were still
hit Starbase 95.
They were never all that far away from other Federation, ships. They just, Kirk was such a he's I'm fucking badass. I'm not calling anybody for help ever. So it's there were a lot of times where they could have just
for directions ever
called the Federation, and but Kirk's no, I'll handle it. I'm gonna beam down to the planet myself.
I know where we're going. I know where we are. I know where we are.
Hey, don't worry. I know a guy. But I think that's, and when I talked to Johnny a few weeks ago, part of why I love Anson Mount's Pike so much is now he's more seems like happier to a degree, but he kind of like he reminds me of Kirk.
He's the most well-adjusted Starfleet captain.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
And it makes sense because, Pike was, Kirk's, mentor kind of. So
in the Kelvin universe, we don't know if this is
right.
Let's get to that in a second, but I want to get back to this episode. We learned a lot more about the Red Angel this episode. Specifically, Saru looked directly at it, and because his eyesight is far better than anybody who's looked at it, which is Spock and Michael Burnham, they were able to get, I guess, the drones that kind of came in and probed Saru and probed Serana when they were on the Ba'ul ship. They recorded what they saw, and the Discovery got that data and saw with Saru's eyes what the Red Angel looks like, and they were able to detect that it is not an angel, but it is a human. It's a humanoid in a mechanized suit.
And I think this further supports my quantum leap connection that I mentioned a couple weeks
Spock
ago.
In the Spock in the Kelvin universe, like Spock.
Well, but here it is again. It's like they say technology we don't yet. They think it's a time traveler technology the Federation doesn't have yet.
Yep.
Somebody's
Folks,
going back in time and fixing catastrophic events.
Folks,
sounds a lot like Dr. Beckett.
Folks, what Brian is referencing is last week in Saints of Imperfection, Section 30, there were scans that were taken of one of these red anomalies, and Admiral Cornwell mentions that there were tachyon particles. And immediately, Leland from Section 31 says, that means time travel! And Captain Pike is like, well, it could also mean 50 other things, but obviously it's time travel. So,
right. Well, this week, too, though, they mentioned time travel.
Well, and that's
just briefly. It was like a throwaway line, but they did say it.
Have you heard this theory that the Red Angel is Spock from the Kelvin movies, from the JJ movies? Because basically the kickoff to the JJ movies, and I'm kind of treading in uncertain water here because I haven't seen Star Trek 2009 in a long time, but from what I remember of this theory, it's that there was a red matter conflict around Romulus in 24th century time, like 23 something, after, during the events of Next Gen, where Romulus was destroyed. Spock goes back in time, our Spock, like Leonard Nimoy Spock, goes back in time to fix it, overshoots, gets there before his Romulan foe, who's played by Eric Bana, and then and Eric Bana destroys the ship that's carrying Kirk's father, creates a Kelvin timeline before Spock destroys him, blah, blah, blah. So people are theorizing that before Spock got back to that point in time, he kind of like hopscotched to different points in time and tried to fix wrongs red matter had done. Because I guess red matter is a really volatile substance, and I'm not. It's kind of it's a good theory. My explanation of it is shaky, but
it sounds a little shaky to me. I love
I like
original
the idea.
Spock, and I'd love to think that like he's the one doing this, but I don't.
Well, but the points they made this episode was that every single time we get a red anomaly, it's over a situation that needs dire help. If you look in the first episode, Brother,
right,
red anomaly appears in the asteroid field. Discovery goes to investigate. They discover Tig Notaro, engineer Jet Reno, who has been marooned on an asteroid, has been keeping 12 people alive.
And it's always like a last minute thing. Like Tig Notaro had been there for 10 months,
and
they show up just as it's about to you have hours
before
left.
It's gonna exactly. And then Spock, the Red Angel directs Spock to where Michael Burnham had run away to when they were both children, according to her childhood story. And you liking that scotch, huh? Pouring some more?
Is that picking up on the mic?
Oh, it's like the
Glenfiddich 14.
The cork coming out of that bottle was louder than me, which is so impressive.
Apologies. But no, I'm not. Sorry.
No need to apologize. I am raising a glass of Pasqua Pinot Grigio della Venezia in your honor. So
class and scotch and wine. We're going super classy. Next time I'll bring like a 6-pack of Natty Ice or something.
Okay, then I'll do some Miller High Life.
Okay.
I thought it was really cool that the Ba'ul have underwater ships.
Yeah, that was cool.
Neat. I really like the design of the ship. And I wanted to ask you about this because it gave me original series vibes in the fact that it's almost like a vertical crystal, whereas a lot of the next gen, era through DS9, Voyager, and even Enterprise, they're all really flat and almost like manta-like.
Yeah.
Whereas this ship was like a vertical crystal with some. It reminded me of the Tellarites. Oh no, Tholians.
Original
Tholians.
Series, they were much less concerned with like aerodynamic design.
Very much so.
Much more like, just throw me a random shape out there.
Let's give me a Christmas ornament, and we're gonna dangle it.
A Christmas ornament, but not like a modern one. I want like a tacky one that your aunt gave you when you were a kid.
Yep.
Like that's what I'm looking for.
Like the tan film is peeling off of it right now.
Yep.
Let's talk about Culber and Stamets. Did you watched last week's episode, right?
Yeah, I'm up to date.
So Hugh Culber is back to life, having been rebirthed from some very questionable science in the mycelial network, but I'm good with it because it's Star Trek and it's not real life.
I'm more okay with the mycelial network and the tardigrade and all that stuff than I am with, hey, we found this sphere, which is basically like the internet, and it's just full of information we can draw on. It's so convenient.
Wikipedia.galaxy.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, here's a giant ball of Wikipedia.
But you know what? I honestly don't mind it, because one of the things I loved about Star Trek, what made Star Trek: The Next Generation so aspirational, was that they had solved so many problems that we still had. They figured out food. We had replicators. They figured out the sorts of like how to basically JSTOR the entire history of a gajillion planets and figure out an algorithm to make use of that history. And that was the ship's computer. Just the way that they had it, like, I like this. I like that it's silly and easy, because it's like, shit, like that's the wonder of Starfleet. They get these breaks. They get these, like, they get to, like, how wonderful would it be to encounter a being that you had never encountered before, and it dies, and it gifts you with its entire life's perspective. Like, as convenient a storytelling device as that is, I still want it to happen. It's still aspirational.
It's very, it's aspirational. See, and I had always just assumed that, like, years of research and people compiling data, and we became, as we evolved as humans, we just became better data miners, maybe. Right. But a giant magic space ball that works too, I guess. Whatever.
Well, I mean, the Vulcans came down in the 21st, 22nd century and enlightened Zefram Cochrane and changed human society. So it happens. There's historical precedents. Yeah,
that's the same thing. Totally.
Okay. My next question, though, how do you I'm asking you this, and I'll ask you a follow-up question. How do you feel about Ash Tyler in general?
I was pretty ambivalent towards him in season 1. And in season 2, with the long hair and the beard, I loathe him.
Oh my god, I love him because of that.
See, I just, like, in season 1, I didn't like him, but I didn't hate him. He was just like, meh. And
now he's just like, he's just that guy in a band. He's that guy in your friend's band. He is the lead singer of your friend's band.
And, like, the concept of Section 31 is very cool to me.
Well, it was.
But the delivery of, like, it's like the writers have to find a reason to justify Ash Tyler's presence on the ship each week.
Oh my god, like, so hard. So hard.
He got, like, all pissy with Pike towards the end of the episode, and I was just like, teleport this guy off the ship.
Also, seriously, like, and this is still a problem for me. Okay, so folks, we remember Ash Tyler. Ash Tyler was initially the Klingon Vogue, who was a fanatic who wound up killing, or almost, no, who wound up almost killing Captain Georgiou, and did get, like, he didn't kill Captain Georgiou, but he was there, and almost killed Michael Burnham, and was reimagined, essentially, by one of his acolytes to be a human with false memories in order to be a sleeper agent on Discovery, which he becomes. He winds up falling in love with Michael Burnham. They share a partnership. He realizes who he is late in the game. She realizes it too. It's very clear they can't stay together, and he can't stay in Starfleet, and he moves to Kronos, the Klingon homeworld, to help the new Klingon chancelloress run the planet. And 2 episodes ago, they realized that wouldn't work out. So he is now part of Section 31, which is a spy organization, but he's still this weird human Klingon hybrid who looks human. And he definitely murdered a member of Discovery's crew during the first season.
Sure did. A member who has come back to life and is currently on the ship.
Yeah, and okay, and so after this happened, after Tyler murdered this person, they figured out that he was half Vogue, half Tyler, and they realized, like, okay, so it wasn't you doing it, and it's clear, like, you're a different person. This is a whole weird thing. They still let him, like, walk around on the ship, not in the brig. And I'm sorry, in no ship that Captain Jean-Luc Picard captains would somebody who has committed murder by, like, accidentally being somebody else be allowed to walk around on the ship, no matter how much we believed in their innocence. Yeah. Like, what? And then the fact that he is still now, like, somebody that one of my fellow writers at Screen Rant, John Quircola, whose name I think I'm mispronouncing, but I don't know, it's my life. Anyway, so now so my friend John on Twitter was like, I can't imagine being any member of Discovery crew and allowing or being okay with Ash Tyler being in uniform, walking around. I don't care if
not just walking around, but you gave him a Starfleet fucking uniform,
and he has authority. But well, yeah, exactly. A Starfleet. Your boy uniform.
Jean-Luc, he would have been like, "Hey, Worf, go keep an eye on this guy." My boy James Tiberius would have fucking karate chopped him right in the neck.
Well, that would have been very, very impulsive, and I really like the idea of Worf sitting in the brig, just looking at Ash Tyler, just looking at him and being like, do you want to see what a real Klingon is like? Oh my God, Worf would eat Ash Tyler for lunch.
Yeah, if Worf didn't get knocked out first.
Okay, listen, you didn't see Worf on DS9, so I'm really not going to have this conversation. We're just going to nip out of the bud.
Not to get too off topic, but when Miss August and I became friends, one of the first things I ever sent her was that there used to be, and I think it's since been removed, but YouTube used to have an excellent 8-minute video of Worf just getting owned over and every time.
Oh my God, it's like as long as Riker sitting down. If you all are not, if you all haven't seen Riker sitting down, it's just just William T. Riker put his leg over a chair because that's the only way he knows how to sit down. And it's long because he does it for 7 seasons. The Worf getting knocked out video, I believe, is longer because
it's my favorite Star Trek related thing to ever hit YouTube. I think is that Worf getting owned video.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to think. Actually, I'm gonna have to think about that. And also, friends, why don't you hit us with your favorite Star Trek YouTube moments? Because there have been many. One of which being
the Patrick. Something better than that Worf video. I want to see it.
There's the Patrick Stewart doing "Hey, you're adorable." It's like a whole musical number where he has a bamboo cane and a pork pie hat. It's very good.
Is it very much? Is it like the alien from the end of Spaceballs, which is mimicking the frog from Warner Brothers?
It's a million times better.
Oh, that is a bold claim, my friend.
I stand by it. It's Patrick Stewart. Bye. So yes, Culber and Stamets. Culber is clearly not. Culber is clearly like, I have a brand new body and this is weird. And Stamets is very much like, I'm so happy you're back.
Did you pick up on Culber being slightly apprehensive today? Like he's kind of like, I'm not totally thrilled with what's happening right now. And Stamets was like a big kid. He's just like, oh, like he was so like. I almost felt like Stamets was like over the top, like had no understanding.
Oh, not at all.
Like you're not reading your boyfriend's body language at all.
Not reading the room. No.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was actually, I think that makes sense though, because what I love about Anthony Rapp's performance this year is that he has really brought across Stamets' mourning and Stamets' desire to leave Starfleet and Stamets' desire to just put this all to bed, because the last mission, the first season, took everything it could from him intellectually and personally. He achieved his intellectual goals. He figured out how to use the mycelial network to travel. He gave his body to it, and then he wound up losing his partner in the process, or in the interim. And I think it makes total sense that he would be so completely happy about it, but I also think it makes even more sense that Culber would be like, because Culber died and was given a new body by fungus, and it's all very strange, that Culber would be, that Culber would
body
be...
by fungus.
Body by fungus. As a cologne I would never buy.
That'd be a tough
Not that I buy cologne. But, and so
like
now...
You're at the ad agency, and they come in and they're like, make me an ad for this. And it's like...
I'm going to be ready. I'll be ready.
It's a career breaker right here.
But no, so Culber, obviously being very disconcerted about this, makes sense. And yeah, I was...
I feel like Culber, totally understandable how he's reacting. Mentally, we don't fully understand the toll that was taken on him while he was in
did you not read the recent study about people who had died and then been found in the mycelial network and then been brought back to life in new bodies?
I think I skimmed it, but I'm like, I didn't have time to read the whole thing.
Well, you need to be up in your medical journals. It's important.
So no, Culver, I think was totally organic, like how he responded, and you're right. Anthony Rapp's performance as Stamets, it's not that it was bad. It's just like, it's almost like as a viewer, I'm not saying it's inaccurate, but it's almost like cringy to look at it and be like, ooh, do you not see what you're, like this is the person you love? Do you not see the pain and turmoil they're going through?
Well, also, too, the idea that I think just I say this perennially every week. Maybe that's perennially annual. Anyway, I say this every week. That Discovery really, really bites off so much. I want to say more than it can chew, but it manages to address every plot line pretty well, according to my standards, every week. But it just feels like every episode tries to accomplish so much. And again, Culber I said this last week, I was like, Culber's reemergence, given the backlash that the show... What are you unwrapping?
It's a fruit by the foot.
Okay, you have a microphone. I'm glad that you're eating a fruit by the foot, though. That makes me happy. Anyway, Culber's reemergence, Culber's resurrection, which happened last week, should have gotten its own episode, I feel like. And then again, we see this week Stamets and Culber's subplot being... Are you like unrolling it like bit by bit?
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to.
No. It's fine. It's really funny. Anyway,
it's delicious.
Is it strawberry?
It is.
Strawberry better than cherry in every candy flavor. Anyway, we see Culber and Stamets again, kind of shoved to the background. I'm not sorry that we saw them this week, but I'm also like, okay, this deserves its own episode. Culber, I would almost at this point really want Culber to have his own bottle episode where it's just him.
I'd be fine with that because I
really want that.
I don't disagree with you that it seemed like his resurrection should have been a bigger deal. It shouldn't have been a B plot.
Right. And it was still good. It was still very well executed.
But even in season 1, his death, I felt, was almost like didn't get as much attention as it should have, because they made Ash Tyler the focus of that as opposed to Culber being the focus of that scene.
Well, and I think that goes back to something you were saying about, how much we learned about Data and how little we learned about Ariam. And I don't mind the idea that Star Trek Discovery spent its first season introducing us to sort of 3 main characters. I don't mind that we didn't learn about the bridge crew that season. And I don't mind that we're getting sort of snippets here and there because at the end of the day, I think it's more organic to grow a show from 1 perspective to 2 and then to 3 and then to 4.
And I don't disagree with you. One of the things because
remember when you always knew when it was time for a Geordi episode in TNG, or when it was like time for a McCoy episode in TOS. You always kind of knew when that was going to happen, and it was like clockwork. And that was fine. That was entertaining. I was happy that we got our time with each crew member. But again, what I say about Discovery is prestige Star Trek. It is Star Trek deserves prestige television, and Discovery is prestige Star Trek, the closest it's ever gotten. And prestige television does not mechanically switch from perspective to perspective to perspective just to make sure that you're giving each actor on contract their due. Right. So I'm kind of fine with this. At the same time, like what we were just talking about really, 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 really makes me want an episode given just to Wilson Cruz and just to Culber, and it's just about his experience coming back to life, because that's what I want to know about. Like, hello? Like that's what I want to hear about. That's what I want to see. And I feel like they've made him a series regular. They were like, oh, killing off Culber was not kill your gays, and like maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but they rectified it. But now I want Culber, like if you're really going to double down on that, give Culber his own episode. Give Wilson Cruz his own episode, and finally give Culber a point of view, because you really only have to do it well once, and then he's family. This is
a double-edged sword, though. So here's, like, in recent years, like, okay, you go back to, like, you and I were born in the 80s, grew up through the 80s and 90s, early 2000s. That's, like, our main...
So far.
Yeah. Sorry, not to give away, not trying to reveal your age. I don't want to be insensitive or anything. But and back then, network television was very much every season. You know, like for the majority of the shows, you had 20+ episodes of everything, and we got used 24. To filler episodes. You know, and so in recent years, as FX and AMC and HBO and then became sort of took prowess away from the networks. One of the things that they were lauded with is they do 10 to 13 episodes a year. You get rid of the filler. You focus on the story. But what that does, you sacrifice some side character development. And I mean,
if you look at the cast of Breaking Bad, it's very small at the end of the day, and it's very small. It's very fluid. Same with Mad Men, had a much larger cast, but people passed in and out of significance very quickly. What television did in the late 90s and early 2000s and moved on to do, which I think Battlestar Galactica is a huge proponent of, was like, hey, we're fine killing our characters. We are fine. We are fine doing. I think the Red Wedding was almost an afterthought to a lot. I think it was like sort of the icing on the cake to genre's real statement to mainstream television of like, hi, this is what we're about. We're about story over actor contracts. We will kill you if it makes for a good story, and we'll do it because we know that people are going to come back for a good story, not for whoever's starring in the show. And I think the way to do that effectively is to start very small and get to know your core people who are going to have that plot armor for several seasons, and then branch it out and get to be really excited about certain supporting characters who are just slightly more expendable.
Well, and when you talk about television series as a whole, over the course of, the history of television, there's never been, more change within a short period of time as there has been in television currently versus like 10 years ago.
Completely.
And I think people now almost like we've come so far in just the last 6 or 7 years, people forget what a big deal it was for like Game of Thrones to kill off, spoiler alert, to kill off Sean Bean back in season 1.
Dude.
That was lauded as the star of the show or whatever, right?
Well, and
he was the big name for the show, and for them to kill off a major character like that in season 1, and then I feel like a lot of other shows since then have like that really opened the floodgates, and that's become much more acceptable now, where prior to that show that wasn't happening.
Well, and the only place it could happen was on HBO, where they were doing television on less of a contract basis and taking things season to season because they could. And I like that Discovery is not exactly an HBO show. Like, I don't think, like, when, 2 episodes ago when everybody thought we were going to lose Doug Jones, I was like, Saru's not going to die. My heart feels like he's going to die, which is just a testament to the performances. But, especially being in our industry, being press, like we would have seen that coming to a degree. And at the end of the day, Star Trek is not that brutal a show. At the same time, Discovery has built in some adaptation, I guess, or the ability to adapt, because, you know, they like Pike is only an interim captain, and it's still this, you know, this ship that people don't quite know what to do with because it has a spore drive, and, you know, can we use it? Can we not?
And it's like you've said before too. When you talk about Discovery, they're pigeonholed to an extent because you've got so much Star Trek history written already, and they're like, we're going to do a prequel, you know, that takes place before the original series.
But only
so it's like we can only do right. So especially so close before, you know, there's only so much they can do, but at the same time, they're making creative differences where they're changing things.
Well, that was kind of my frustration with Discovery, like putting itself 10 years behind the original series. It's like, people will eventually come to you if you just like sit and do your thing long enough. Why do you have to go behind the original series and try to rewrite this canon? And so I started questioning why they would rewrite this canon.
But you answered your own question right there, though, Alex, is because you said, you know, like, if you wait long enough, people will come. In today's industry, you know, patience has never been a strength in Hollywood or in television. But I feel like it's even less so now. You're given much less time to develop something than you used to be.
Okay, folks, I think that's a good place to tie it off this week. I would say if you're looking for Star Trek recommendations for other episodes to watch that are related to this one, I would go with Attached. It is a really good TNG episode featuring Picard and Crusher. They are telepathically connected after beaming down to a planet that the Federation is thinking of indicting into the Federation, but the planet is very divided. Half the species want to join the Federation, half of them don't. And I find that episode's conflict, the diplomatic conflict, very much mirrors what happens in Kaminar this week. Also, a friend of mine, John, on Twitter, whose last name I can't pronounce yet, recommended Skin of Evil for Tasha Yar, because the being that kills Tasha Yar, which is only encountered on one planet, is a tar being that can change its form, very much like the Butwool can. So it's a loose reference, and it probably doesn't have anything to do with anything, but, you know, something to chew on. Brian Kronner, where can we find you on social media?
It's at Dr. Kronner, just DrKronner on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter and Instagram as much as I should. I waste way too much time arguing with people on Facebook. But
where can we find you on Facebook?
Just, you know, Brian Kronner. Pretty easy to find. I'm all over the place. I don't. Nothing's private. I'm pretty public and all over the place. But real quick, speaking of Tasha Yar, who was played by Denise Crosby, who you know Alex and I have discussed several times before. She was in like Pet Sematary and everything. She's in
the best. She is the best.
She plays in a movie with Jim Carrey and Thomas F. Wilson, who was Biff in Back to the Future, called High Strung. And Steve Odenkirk is the star of the movie.
Shut up.
It's never been released on DVD. If you can find an old video copy of this, this movie is one of my all-time favorites. It's like very like low budget, weird, and she plays like a horrible person. But it's funny because whenever I see her, I think more of High Strung than I do of Star Trek. And so when I know we're totally off topic, but Denise Crosby,
no.
If you like Tasha Yar, if you like Denise Crosby, find High Strung. I'm gonna find it. It's a weird movie, but it's worth your 90 minutes. So.
My name is Alexander August. You can find me on social at ALX August, no E. I am that on all platforms. Please feel free to check me out. I am also going to appear on Mark Altman's Inglorious Trexperts and Chase Masterson's Disco Nights in the next couple of weeks, so tune in for those. And Johnny and I will be back next week with our analysis of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 7, Light and Shadows. Who knows? Maybe at some point we might see Spock. At this point, I am now wishing for him, which is a very good strategy for the Star Trek Discovery crew, because at the beginning of the season, I was like, I hope I never see Spock. I don't want to see Spock. This is dumb. And now, because they've like used him as carrot bait for me, I am like into it. Where is my Spock? Where is Ethan Peck? I'm excited. It works,
They're
guys.
very smart about it. We got Pike. We got no Enterprise. We got no Pike. Spock so far.
We got the perfect captain in history, and we got sexy number one ordering a cheeseburger with jalapenos, and no Spock. They have played this perfectly.
Yeah, pretty much better than I expected so far.
Me too. Which actually makes me really excited. Oh my gosh, this was so fun. Thanks for coming over, Brian Kronner.
Anytime. I very much enjoyed it. A little out of practice, but it was fun.
It was fun. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.